The circle of life is one of those ideas that seems simple at first. Most people encounter the phrase long before they ever study biology. It appears in books, documentaries, conversations about nature, and observations of the world around us. Yet beneath those familiar words lies one of the most remarkable scientific realities on Earth. Every living thing that exists today is part of an unbroken chain stretching back through countless generations. Every plant, every animal, every fungus, and every microscopic organism participates in a vast process of growth, change, survival, reproduction, and renewal. Tonight, as we explore some of the most peaceful and fascinating facts about the circle of life, we can begin with a surprisingly comforting thought. At this very moment, billions of living organisms are carrying out ordinary activities that have been happening for millions of years. Seeds are sprouting in dark soil. Tiny bacteria are breaking down fallen leaves. Birds are feeding their young. Trees are moving water from roots toward leaves. Fish are swimming through oceans that have supported life for hundreds of millions of years. Life is never completely still. Yet despite this constant activity, the overall pattern remains remarkably stable. Organisms come and go, but the larger system continues. One of the first scientific facts about the circle of life is that every living organism requires energy. Energy is the thread that connects nearly all biological processes. Without energy, cells cannot function, tissues cannot grow, and organisms cannot survive. The primary source of this energy for most life on Earth is the sun. Every day, sunlight travels approximately 93 million miles across space before reaching our planet. A small fraction of that light is captured by plants, algae, and certain bacteria through a process known as photosynthesis. During photosynthesis, light energy is converted into chemical energy that can be stored within molecules. This simple process quietly supports almost every ecosystem on Earth. The grass growing in a field, the leaves on a forest tree, and the microscopic algae drifting through the ocean all participate in this ancient exchange. In many ways, the circle of life begins with sunlight arriving on Earth and becoming part of living matter. Every animal that eats plants, and every predator that eats those animals, is connected to this original source of energy. Another gentle truth about life is that nothing exists completely alone. Even organisms that appear independent are woven into larger ecological relationships. Consider a single oak tree standing in a meadow. It may seem like an individual organism, yet countless forms of life interact with it every day. Birds nest among its branches, insects feed on its leaves, fungi grow among its roots, microorganisms inhabit the soil around it. The tree itself exchanges gases with the atmosphere, taking in carbon dioxide and releasing oxygen. Rain provides water. Sunlight provides energy. Minerals move upward from the ground. What appears to be a solitary living thing is actually part of an intricate network of connections. Scientists often describe ecosystems as webs rather than chains because relationships spread in many directions at once. Every organism influences other organisms in ways both large and small. The circle of life is therefore not a straight path, but a vast, interconnected system where countless processes occur simultaneously. One of the most fascinating facts about living systems is that matter itself participates in a cycle. The atoms that make up your body today have likely been part of countless other things throughout Earth's history. A carbon atom inside a leaf may eventually become part of an animal. Later, it may return to the atmosphere, travel through the air, and eventually become part of another plant. Water molecules move through clouds, rivers, oceans, soil, and living tissues. Nitrogen atoms circulate between the atmosphere and biological systems. Nothing remains permanently fixed in one place. The materials of life are constantly being reused. This recycling process is one reason life has been able to persist on Earth for such extraordinary lengths of time. Rather than requiring entirely new materials, ecosystems continually transform and redistribute existing ones. The same basic elements that supported ancient forests, prehistoric animals, and early forms of life continue to support organisms today. In a very real sense, Every living thing participates in a shared planetary exchange that has been unfolding for billions of years. Reproduction represents another essential part of the circle of life. Every species that exists today is the result of successful reproduction across immense spans of time. The process takes many forms. Some organisms release spores, others lay eggs, some produce seeds. Mammals nurture developing offspring within their bodies. Yet despite these differences, the underlying principle remains remarkably consistent. Life creates new life. This continuity links generations together in an unbroken sequence. The oldest living lineages on Earth extend back through unimaginable stretches of history. Every organism alive today inherited information from previous generations. Within cells, genetic material carries instructions that help guide growth and development. These instructions are copied and passed onward, allowing characteristics to persist across time. Yet reproduction is never perfectly identical. Small variations appear. Over many generations, these variations contribute to the diversity of life we see today. The enormous variety of organisms on Earth emerged through countless cycles of inheritance, adaptation, and change. The circle of life is therefore both stable and dynamic, preserving continuity while allowing gradual transformation. Perhaps one of the quietest facts in nature involves decomposition. Although it is often overlooked, decomposition is among the most important biological processes on Earth. When plants and animals die, specialized organisms begin the work of breaking down organic material. Fungi extend delicate networks through fallen wood and leaf litter. Bacteria perform complex chemical transformations invisible to the human eye. Insects assist in recycling nutrients back into ecosystems. Through these processes, materials that once formed living tissues become available for new life. Forest soils become rich with nutrients. Grasslands receive valuable organic matter. Ecosystems renew themselves continuously. Without decomposition, nutrients would remain locked away, and life would struggle to continue. Instead, nature maintains a remarkable balance. Growth and decay exist together as complementary processes. One generation contributes to the next, not through permanence, but through renewal. In this way, the circle of life is not merely about beginnings and endings. It is about continuous transformation, where every stage becomes part of something larger, and where the story of life quietly continues from one moment to the next. As this ongoing exchange unfolds across the planet, another remarkable fact becomes visible. Life exists at many different scales at the same time. Human beings often notice large animals, towering trees, or colorful flowers first because these are easy to see. Yet much of the circle of life takes place among organisms so small that millions could fit within a single drop of water. Microscopic life forms have shaped Earth for billions of years, long before forests appeared, before dinosaurs walked across ancient landscapes, and before mammals evolved. Microorganisms were already transforming the planet. Tiny bacteria helped alter the composition of the atmosphere. Microscopic algae continue to produce significant amounts of the oxygen that supports animal life today. Even within a handful of healthy soil, countless microorganisms are carrying out chemical reactions every second. They help release nutrients, break down organic matter, and support the growth of plants. Although invisible to casual observation, these organisms are among the most important participants in the circle of life. Their quiet work forms the foundation upon which larger ecosystems depend. A fascinating feature of living systems is that cooperation often exists alongside competition. Nature is sometimes described as a struggle for survival, and certainly organisms must obtain food, water, space, and other resources. Yet many forms of life also thrive through cooperation. One gentle example can be found beneath forests. The roots of trees are frequently connected to networks of fungi that spread through the soil. These fungal threads can help trees absorb water and minerals more efficiently. In return, the fungi receive energy-rich compounds produced by photosynthesis. Both organisms benefit from the relationship. Similar partnerships appear throughout nature. Pollinating insects visit flowers while gathering food. Coral reefs depend on microscopic algae living within their tissues. Certain birds remove parasites from larger animals. The circle of life is therefore not only a story of individual survival, it is also a story of relationships that allow organisms to accomplish things they could not easily achieve alone. Across ecosystems, cooperation quietly contributes to stability, resilience, and long-term survival. The movement of seasons provides another beautiful example of life's repeating patterns. In many regions of the world, organisms have adapted to predictable annual cycles. Plants may grow rapidly during warmer months and become dormant during colder periods. Birds migrate across continents in response to changing conditions. Mammals adjust their behavior as food availability shifts throughout the year. These seasonal rhythms create a sense of continuity within ecosystems. Every spring, countless seeds germinate. Every autumn, leaves fall and return nutrients to the soil. Lakes, forests, grasslands, and deserts all experience recurring patterns that influence the lives of the organisms living there. Although each year differs slightly from the last, the larger cycle remains recognizable. For millions of years, life has adapted to these repeating environmental changes. The result is a planet filled with rhythms that connect individual organisms to broader ecological processes. Many living things carry internal biological clocks that help them anticipate these changes, allowing them to respond before conditions fully arrive. One of the most surprising facts about the circle of life is that death itself contributes to biodiversity. When an old tree falls in a forest, it does not simply disappear from the ecosystem. Instead, it creates new opportunities. Sunlight reaches the forest floor through the opening in the canopy. Young plants begin to grow. Insects colonize the decaying wood. Birds may use cavities within the trunk for nesting. Fungi spread through the fallen timber. What appears to be an ending often becomes the beginning of numerous new ecological relationships. Scientists sometimes refer to fallen trees as nurse logs because they provide support for developing plants and organisms. Similar processes occur throughout nature. Empty shells become homes for other creatures. Decomposing vegetation enriches soil. Abandoned burrows are reused by new occupants. Life continually transforms existing structures into resources for future generations. This constant reuse helps ecosystems remain productive and diverse over long periods of time. Another peaceful observation emerges when we consider how slowly some forms of life operate. Humans often measure time in days, months, and years, yet many biological processes unfold across decades, centuries, or even longer periods. Certain trees can live for thousands of years. Coral reefs may develop gradually over centuries. Soil formation can require immense spans of time. Entire ecosystems sometimes change so slowly that individual organisms experience only a small part of the larger process. A forest that appears permanent to a person may actually be undergoing subtle transformations from one generation to the next. Species compositions shift, soil characteristics evolve, climate influences growth patterns. These changes often occur so gradually that they escape immediate notice. The circle of life therefore includes both rapid events and extraordinarily slow developments. Some organisms complete their lives in a matter of days, while others persist for centuries. Together, they form a living system operating across many different timescales simultaneously. The oceans offer one of the largest examples of life's interconnected cycles. Covering most of Earth's surface, they contain vast ecosystems ranging from sunlit coastal waters to deep regions where sunlight never reaches. Near the surface, microscopic plankton capture energy from sunlight and form the foundation of marine food webs. Small animals consume the plankton, larger animals consume those smaller creatures. Nutrients circulate through the system in complex pathways. Even the deepest parts of the ocean participate in global biological cycles. Organic material slowly sinks from upper waters, carrying nutrients and carbon downward. Ocean currents transport heat, dissolved substances, and living organisms across enormous distances. Whales migrate between feeding and breeding grounds thousands of miles apart. Tiny drifting organisms may travel with currents across entire ocean basins. Although individual creatures experience only portions of this vast environment, all are connected through shared ecological processes that have operated for millions of years. Perhaps one of the most comforting scientific realities is that life persists through change. Earth's history includes volcanic eruptions, shifting continents, changing climates, and dramatic environmental transformations. Throughout these changes, life has demonstrated remarkable adaptability. Species have evolved new characteristics, ecosystems have reorganized themselves, new opportunities have emerged from changing conditions. The forms of life present today differ greatly from those that existed hundreds of millions of years ago, yet the underlying processes remain familiar. Energy flows through ecosystems, nutrients cycle through living and non-living systems, organisms reproduce, grow, interact, and contribute to future generations. The circle continues, not because individual organisms last forever, but because life itself possesses an extraordinary capacity for renewal. Across forests, grasslands, oceans, deserts, rivers, mountains, and wetlands, countless living things participate in this enduring pattern. And as we continue exploring these gentle facts, we begin to see that the circle of life is not a single cycle but a vast collection of interconnected cycles, all quietly unfolding together across the surface of our remarkable planet. When scientists study ecosystems over long periods of time, they often discover that stability does not mean remaining exactly the same. Instead, stability frequently emerges from continuous adjustment. A meadow may contain hundreds of species of plants, insects, birds, and microorganisms. The populations of these organisms rise and fall from year to year. Some seasons bring abundant rainfall, while others are drier. Temperatures vary. Certain species become temporarily more common, while others become less visible. Yet despite these fluctuations, the ecosystem as a whole often continues functioning. This ability to absorb change while maintaining essential processes is known as resilience. Resilience is one of the most important characteristics of living systems. It allows ecosystems to recover after disturbances and continue supporting life. Forests regrow after fires. Wetlands recover after floods. Grasslands return following periods of drought. The circle of life includes not only growth and reproduction, but also recovery. Nature possesses countless mechanisms that help living communities adapt to changing conditions, ensuring that life continues even when circumstances are far from perfect. Predators play an important role in this balance, although they are sometimes misunderstood. At first glance, predation may appear harsh, but from an ecological perspective it helps maintain healthy ecosystems. Predators influence the behavior and distribution of prey species. They can prevent certain populations from growing beyond the capacity of available resources. In many ecosystems, the presence of predators contributes to greater biodiversity. A famous example comes from studies of wolves, deer, and vegetation. When predator populations change, the effects can ripple throughout entire ecosystems, influencing plant growth, riverbank stability, and the distribution of other species. Scientists refer to these widespread influences as trophic cascades. The term may sound complex, but the underlying idea is quite simple. Actions at one level of an ecosystem can affect many other levels. The circle of life is filled with such connections. Organisms rarely influence only themselves. Their activities often shape the environment around them in ways that affect countless other forms of life. Plants provide another remarkable example of biological influence. Although they remain rooted in one place, plants are far from passive participants in nature. They respond continuously to their surroundings. They adjust growth toward available light. They regulate water use through tiny openings called stomata. Some plants release chemical signals when damaged by insects. Others produce compounds that discourage herbivores from feeding on them. Research continues to reveal sophisticated ways in which plants interact with their environment. Yet perhaps their greatest contribution remains their ability to transform sunlight into biological energy. Every forest, prairie, meadow, and garden functions in part because plants capture energy that would otherwise pass across Earth's surface unused. In doing so, they create the foundation for countless food webs. The leaves moving gently in a breeze may appear simple, but they represent one of the most important biological innovations in Earth's history. Through photosynthesis, Plants help sustain much of the circle of life. Water also occupies a central place within this ongoing process. Every known form of life depends on it. Water transports nutrients, regulates temperature, supports chemical reactions, and provides habitats for countless organisms. Yet water itself participates in a remarkable planetary cycle. Solar energy causes evaporation from oceans, lakes, rivers, and soils. Water vapor rises into the atmosphere and eventually forms clouds. Precipitation returns water to Earth's surface as rain, snow, or other forms of moisture. Some water flows into streams and rivers, some seeps into underground reservoirs, some enters living organisms and becomes part of biological processes. The same water molecules may travel through many different environments over time. A drop of water falling onto a mountain slope might eventually reach the ocean, enter a cloud, return as rainfall, nourish a forest, and continue its journey once again. Life depends upon this constant movement. Without the water cycle, ecosystems as we know them could not exist. One particularly fascinating fact is that living organisms can influence the physical environment itself. Beavers, for example, build dams that alter the flow of rivers and create wetlands. Coral organisms construct reefs that become habitats for thousands of species. Earthworms change soil structure as they move through the ground. Even microscopic organisms can influence large-scale environmental processes. Scientists sometimes describe certain species as ecosystem engineers because their activities modify habitats in ways that affect many other organisms. These examples remind us that life does not simply adapt to its environment. Life also helps shape the environment. The circle of life is therefore a dynamic partnership between organisms and the world around them. Over time, living things and their surroundings influence one another in an ongoing exchange that contributes to the diversity and complexity of Earth's ecosystems. Migration offers another beautiful illustration of life's interconnected nature. Every year, billions of animals travel across remarkable distances. Birds cross oceans and continents, fish move between freshwater and marine environments, mammals journey across grasslands, tundra, and deserts. These migrations often follow seasonal patterns that have developed over countless generations. Some species navigate using the position of the sun, others respond to Earth's magnetic field, changing temperatures, or environmental cues that scientists are still working to fully understand. Migration allows organisms to take advantage of resources that vary across time and space. It also connects distant ecosystems together. A bird that breeds in one region and spends winter in another becomes part of ecological communities thousands of miles apart. Through migration, the circle of life extends across entire continents, linking environments that might otherwise seem completely separate. At the cellular level, the circle of life becomes even more extraordinary. Every living organism is composed of cells, and within those cells, countless processes occur every moment. Molecules are assembled, energy is transferred, information is copied, and damaged components are repaired or replaced. Even while resting quietly, living organisms remain active internally. Cells constantly exchange materials with their surroundings. Proteins are produced and recycled. Chemical signals travel between tissues. The human body alone contains trillions of cells engaged in coordinated activity. Similar processes occur throughout the living world. From tiny bacteria to giant trees, the circle of life is therefore not only visible in ecosystems and populations, it exists within every organism as well. Renewal occurs on the microscopic scale just as it does on the planetary scale. Life continually maintains itself through cycles of construction, transformation, and renewal. As we move deeper into understanding these patterns, an elegant theme begins to emerge. Nature rarely wastes resources. Energy flows onward, nutrients are reused, habitats are transformed rather than abandoned. Organisms contribute to processes larger than themselves, often without any awareness of the broader system they support. A single leaf may nourish soil. That soil may support new plants. Those plants may sustain animals. Those animals may contribute nutrients that support future growth. The connections extend outward in countless directions. Although individual lives are finite, the processes linking them together continue across generations. And in this quiet continuity, we find one of the most remarkable scientific facts of all. The circle of life is not a fixed structure that exists somewhere outside of nature. It is the living process itself, unfolding continuously through every forest, river, ocean, grassland, and microscopic ecosystem across our planet, moment by moment, day after day, year after year. If we could observe Earth from far above, and watch thousands of years pass in only a few moments, one of the first things we might notice would be the constant movement of life across the landscape. Forests expand and contract, rivers gradually change course, grasslands shift with changing climates, coastlines evolve as waves reshape the edges of continents. Throughout these transformations, living organisms respond, adapt, migrate, and establish new communities. What appears permanent during a human lifetime is often part of a much longer process. A mature forest may seem ancient and unchanging, yet every tree within it has a story of growth. Young seedlings wait beneath the canopy, older trees gradually age, fallen branches return nutrients to the soil. Insects, fungi, birds, and mammals interact with the forest every day. The ecosystem is never truly still. Instead, it exists in a state of continuous renewal. Scientists sometimes describe this process as ecological succession, the gradual change in biological communities over time. Succession can occur after disturbances such as fires, storms, or volcanic eruptions, but it also unfolds naturally as environments develop. The circle of life includes these slow transformations, where one stage of an ecosystem creates the conditions for the next. Volcanic islands provide a particularly fascinating example of how life establishes itself. Imagine a newly formed island rising from the ocean, its surface consisting mainly of bare rock. At first, conditions may seem unsuitable for life. Yet gradually, hardy organisms begin to arrive. Wind carries spores and seeds. Birds transport plant material. Microorganisms colonize tiny cracks in the rock. Over time, weathering and biological activity help create thin layers of soil. Plants begin to grow. Insects arrive. Larger organisms follow. What started as a barren landscape slowly becomes a thriving ecosystem. This process may require decades, centuries, or even longer, depending on local conditions. The important point is that life has an extraordinary ability to establish itself wherever suitable opportunities exist. Across Earth's history, countless ecosystems have emerged through similar processes. The circle of life is therefore not only about maintaining existing communities, but also about creating new ones. One of the most remarkable participants in these processes is soil itself. Many people think of soil simply as dirt, yet scientifically it is one of the most complex environments on the planet. Healthy soil contains minerals, water, air, organic matter, plant roots, fungi, bacteria, insects, and countless other organisms. A single teaspoon of fertile soil may contain billions of microorganisms representing thousands of species. Together, these organisms contribute to nutrient cycling, decomposition, and plant growth. Soil acts as a bridge between the living and non-living components of ecosystems. It stores nutrients, retains water, and supports vast communities of life. Without healthy soil, forests, grasslands, and agricultural systems would struggle to function. The quiet layer beneath our feet participates in countless biological cycles every day, making it one of the most important yet often overlooked elements of the circle of life. Another peaceful fact about nature is that many organisms serve multiple roles within ecosystems. Consider a flowering plant. It captures sunlight through photosynthesis. It provides food for herbivores. Its flowers attract pollinators. Its roots stabilize soil. Its leaves contribute organic matter when they fall. Its seeds may nourish birds or mammals. One organism can influence many different parts of an ecosystem simultaneously. Similar patterns appear throughout nature. A bird may disperse seeds while feeding. A fish may transport nutrients between habitats. An insect may pollinate flowers while serving as food for larger animals. These overlapping functions create resilience because ecosystems do not depend on a single pathway. Instead, numerous connections help maintain the flow of energy and materials. The circle of life operates through networks of relationships that reinforce one another in subtle ways. As scientists have explored ecosystems in greater detail, they have discovered that diversity itself contributes to stability. Environments containing many different species often possess a greater capacity to adapt to changing conditions. If one species becomes less common, others may continue performing similar ecological functions. Diversity provides flexibility. It allows ecosystems to respond to disturbances without losing essential processes. Tropical rainforests offer a striking example. These ecosystems contain immense numbers of species occupying countless ecological roles. Although individual organisms may come and go, the overall system remains productive because many interconnected relationships support its operation. Diversity can be found not only among large animals and plants, but also among microorganisms, fungi, and countless forms of life that remain largely invisible. The richness of life contributes to the resilience of the circle itself. Nighttime ecosystems reveal another fascinating dimension of Earth's biological rhythms. As daylight fades, many organisms begin activities that remain hidden during the day. Owls leave their resting places to hunt. Bats emerge in search of insects. Nocturnal mammals move through forests and grasslands. Flowers that bloom at night release fragrances to attract specialized pollinators. Even the sounds of ecosystems often change after sunset. Different species become active, creating entirely new patterns of interaction. For humans, nighttime may represent a period of rest, but across much of the natural world, life continues with remarkable energy and purpose. The circle of life does not pause when darkness arrives. Instead, it shifts into another phase, revealing a different collection of organisms adapted to conditions that others avoid. The deep ocean offers an even more surprising example of life's adaptability. Far below the reach of sunlight, entire ecosystems thrive in environments once thought incapable of supporting life. Around hydrothermal vents on the ocean floor, hot mineral-rich water emerges from beneath Earth's crust. Specialized microorganisms use chemical energy rather than sunlight to produce organic matter. These microorganisms form the foundation of unique food webs that support worms, crustaceans, fish, and other organisms. The discovery of these ecosystems transformed scientific understanding of life's possibilities. It demonstrated that biological communities can flourish under conditions very different from those found at the surface. The circle of life is therefore not limited to familiar environments. It extends into deserts, polar regions, underground caves, deep oceans, and countless other habitats where organisms have evolved remarkable solutions to environmental challenges. Perhaps one of the most profound observations about life is that every organism participates in processes much larger than itself. A migrating bird follows instincts shaped by generations of evolution. A tree contributes oxygen, habitat, and nutrients throughout its lifetime. A microorganism performs chemical reactions that influence entire ecosystems. None of these organisms needs to understand the larger system in order to contribute to it. Through ordinary biological activities, each becomes part of a vast network of interactions stretching across space and time. The circle of life emerges not from central planning, but from countless individual organisms carrying out the tasks necessary for survival. Together, these activities create patterns of extraordinary complexity and beauty. As we continue moving through these gentle observations, the picture becomes increasingly clear. Life is not a collection of isolated events. It is an ongoing process of connection, transformation, adaptation, and renewal. Energy moves from sunlight into living systems, nutrients circulate through ecosystems. Organisms influence one another directly and indirectly. Generations succeed one another across immense spans of time. Every forest, meadow, river, reef, and ocean participates in this larger pattern. And while individual details change continuously, the fundamental process endures, quietly linking the smallest microorganism to the largest ecosystem in one vast and ongoing circle that has been turning across our planet for billions of years. When we continue following the circle of life into its quieter and less visible layers, we begin to notice that even decay and renewal have their own timing and structure. Nothing in nature disappears instantly. Instead, Living matter passes through stages of transformation that depend on temperature, moisture, oxygen, and the presence of countless organisms specialized in breaking things down. A fallen leaf in a forest does not simply vanish. It softens as fungi spread through its tissues. Bacteria slowly alter its chemical structure. Small insects feed on it and fragment it further. Over time, it becomes indistinguishable from the surrounding soil, yet its material does not leave the ecosystem. It becomes part of a new cycle of growth. In this way, what we call decay is actually a form of redistribution. Energy becomes less concentrated, but materials remain in circulation. The circle of life depends on this gentle breakdown process as much as it depends on growth. Without it, ecosystems would gradually become locked, with nutrients trapped in forms that could no longer support new life. Even within the human body, similar cycles occur continuously. Cells are constantly being replaced. Some types of cells live only a few days, while others may persist for years. Skin renews itself slowly over time. The lining of the digestive system regenerates at a faster pace. Blood cells are created and removed in a steady balance. This process is not a sign of instability, but of maintenance. Living systems remain healthy by continuously repairing and renewing themselves. Inside each cell, molecular components are also recycled. Proteins are broken down and rebuilt. Damaged structures are removed and replaced. Energy is carefully managed through chemical reactions that convert nutrients into usable forms. Although we often think of the body as something fixed, it is more accurately described as a dynamic system of ongoing reconstruction. In a quiet sense, each living organism carries its own miniature circle of life within it, repeating cycles of creation and renewal at a microscopic scale every moment. Across ecosystems, timing plays a subtle but important role in how life unfolds. Many organisms rely on environmental cues to coordinate their activities. Changes in daylight length signal seasonal shifts. Temperature fluctuations influence growth and reproduction. Rain patterns determine when seeds germinate or when animals migrate. These timing mechanisms are often precise enough to synchronize entire populations. For example, certain species of insects emerge only during specific periods of the year, creating brief windows of intense ecological activity. Plants may flower in coordinated bursts that support pollinators. Fish may spawn in synchronized events that increase the chances of survival for their offspring. These patterns are not random. They have developed through long periods of adaptation, allowing organisms to align their life cycles with the conditions that best support survival. The circle of life is therefore also a circle of time, where biological events are carefully tuned to the rhythms of the planet. In many environments, life also depends on subtle chemical communication. Plants, animals, fungi, and microorganisms release chemical signals into their surroundings that influence the behavior of others. Some trees, when attacked by insects, can release compounds that warn nearby plants to strengthen their defenses. Certain fungi exchange chemical information with plant roots, guiding nutrient exchange. Animals use pheromones to communicate reproductive readiness, territory boundaries, or danger. Even microbial communities respond to chemical gradients in their environment, adjusting their behavior collectively. Although these interactions are invisible to human perception, they form an essential part of ecological relationships. Life is not only connected through physical contact or food chains, but also through a continuous exchange of chemical information. These quiet signals help maintain balance within ecosystems and contribute to the coordination of the circle of life. The structure of food webs reveals another layer of this interconnected system. Instead of a simple linear chain where one organism eats another, most ecosystems resemble complex branching networks. A single species may consume multiple types of food and may itself be consumed by multiple predators. Energy moves through many pathways, often circulating through different levels before eventually returning to the environment. Primary producers capture energy from sunlight or chemical sources. Herbivores consume plants. Carnivores consume herbivores. Decomposers break down remains at every level. At each step, some energy is lost as heat, while some is passed onward. This gradual flow shapes the structure of ecosystems and influences the abundance of different species. The circle of life, viewed through this lens, becomes a network of energy transfer that supports a wide variety of living forms, each occupying its own place within a larger system. Certain ecosystems demonstrate this interconnectedness in especially delicate ways. Coral reefs, for example, rely on a close relationship between coral animals and microscopic algae living within their tissues. The algae provide energy through photosynthesis, while the coral provides shelter and access to nutrients. This partnership supports one of the most diverse marine ecosystems on Earth. However, such systems can be sensitive to environmental changes. Slight increases in temperature or shifts in water chemistry can disrupt the balance, leading to changes in species composition. Despite this sensitivity, coral reefs also demonstrate resilience, with the potential to recover over time if conditions stabilize. These examples remind us that the circle of life includes both strength and vulnerability. Ecosystems persist not because they are unchanging, but because they are capable of adjustment. On land, similar relationships can be observed in grassland ecosystems. These environments often depend on the interactions between grazing animals, plants, soil organisms, and climate patterns. Grazing can stimulate plant growth by removing older tissues and allowing new shoots to develop. Animal movement distributes nutrients across landscapes. Soil organisms process organic material and support plant health. Periodic disturbances such as fire can also play a role in maintaining ecological balance by preventing the dominance of a single species and encouraging diversity. Grasslands illustrate how life is shaped not only by growth, but also by regular cycles of disturbance and renewal. The circle of life includes these recurring events as essential components of long-term ecological stability. As we observe these patterns more closely, it becomes clear that life on Earth is deeply interconnected across scales that range from microscopic molecules to global systems. The behavior of a single organism can influence local surroundings, while collective behavior across millions of organisms can influence climate, atmosphere, and planetary cycles. Forests, for example, play a role in regulating carbon dioxide levels. Oceans influence global temperature patterns. Microbial communities contribute to soil fertility and atmospheric chemistry. These interactions form feedback loops that help regulate Earth's environment over time. The circle of life is therefore not confined to biological systems alone. It is intertwined with the physical and chemical processes of the planet itself, forming a unified system in which life and Earth continually shape one another. As this long reflection continues, a quiet realization begins to form. Life is not built around permanence, but around continuity. Individual organisms come into existence, experience growth, interact with their environment, and eventually return their materials to the system. Yet the overall process does not end. It transforms, it repeats in new forms, under new conditions, in new combinations. Every moment carries forward the results of countless previous moments, while also preparing the conditions for what comes next. The circle of life is not a closed loop in a simple sense. It is an evolving pattern, endlessly unfolding across time, where each ending becomes part of a new beginning, and where the continuity of existence is maintained through constant, quiet change. When we continue to follow the circle of life into even slower and more gradual processes, we begin to see that some of Earth's most important changes happen over timescales that are almost impossible to perceive directly. Mountains rise and wear down. Continents drift across the surface of the planet at a pace roughly similar to the growth of human fingernails. Over millions of years, these movements reshape climates, redirect ocean currents, and create new environments where life must adapt once again. Species that once thrived in one region may gradually shift their ranges or evolve into new forms better suited to changing conditions. In this sense, the circle of life is not only biological but also geological. The living world and the physical structure of Earth are connected through slow, continuous interactions. Rocks break down into soil, soil supports plants, plants influence atmospheric composition, and atmospheric changes influence climate and geological processes. Everything participates in a long, unfolding exchange, that stretches far beyond any single lifetime. Even the atmosphere itself is part of this larger cycle. Gases move between air, water, soil, and living organisms in constant exchange. Carbon dioxide is absorbed by plants and released again through respiration and decomposition. Oxygen is produced and consumed through countless biological processes. Nitrogen is transformed by bacteria into forms that plants can use, then eventually return to the atmosphere. These cycles are not isolated systems but overlapping processes that sustain one another. Without them, life as we know it could not exist. The air we breathe is not a static background but an active participant in the circle of life. It carries the products of biological activity and returns them in transformed states, maintaining a balance that has developed over billions of years. Within this planetary system, even seemingly small interactions can have large and lasting effects. A change in vegetation in one region can influence rainfall patterns. Shifts in ocean temperature can affect weather systems across continents. The presence or absence of certain species can alter nutrient flows within ecosystems. These cascading effects demonstrate that the circle of life operates through interconnected feedback loops rather than isolated events. Scientists study these relationships to better understand how ecosystems respond to change. What emerges is a picture of extraordinary complexity, where small variations can propagate through systems and influence distant outcomes. Yet despite this complexity, the overall system continues functioning, maintained by countless stabilizing interactions that have developed through evolution and environmental history. One of the most profound aspects of life is its ability to store information across generations. Genetic material carries instructions that guide the development of organisms, ensuring that essential traits are passed forward. This information is encoded in molecules that replicate with remarkable accuracy, yet also allow for variation. Over time, these small variations accumulate, leading to the diversity of life forms that exist today. Evolution is not a sudden process, but a gradual accumulation of changes shaped by environmental conditions and natural interactions. Through this mechanism, life adapts to new challenges while maintaining continuity with the past. Every organism alive today is part of an unbroken chain of information stretching back through immense spans of time. The circle of life is therefore also a circle of memory, where biological information is preserved, modified, and transmitted across generations. At the level of ecosystems, information is not stored only in genes, but also in behaviors and interactions. Animals learn migration routes. Plants adjust growth patterns based on environmental conditions. Microorganisms respond to chemical signals in their surroundings. These forms of biological knowledge are not written down, yet they persist through repetition and adaptation. Over time, successful behaviors become embedded in the structure of ecosystems. This allows life to respond to changing environments without requiring complete reinvention. The continuity of life is supported not only by physical cycles, but also by patterns of information that guide how organisms interact with the world around them. When we observe ecosystems through this lens, even disturbances begin to appear as part of a larger rhythm. Fires, storms, floods, and droughts may disrupt local systems, but they also create opportunities for renewal and change. Some seeds only germinate after exposure to fire. Floodwaters can redistribute nutrients across landscapes. Storms can open gaps in forests that allow new growth. These events are not separate from the circle of life but integrated into it. They contribute to the ongoing process of transformation that shapes ecosystems over time. Rather than breaking the cycle, disturbances often help maintain it, ensuring that systems do not remain static but continue to evolve and regenerate. In many ways, the circle of life is best understood not as a fixed structure, but as a pattern of relationships. It is defined by connections rather than boundaries. Every organism exists in relation to others, and those relationships shift over time. Energy flows, materials cycle, information is exchanged, and environments change. The result is a dynamic system that is always in motion yet consistently structured by recurring processes. This balance between change and continuity is one of the defining features of life on Earth. It allows ecosystems to remain stable enough to support life, while flexible enough to adapt to new conditions. Even human activity is now part of this broader system. Agriculture, cities, transportation, and industry all interact with natural cycles in complex ways. Humans rely on ecosystems for food, water, and materials, while also influencing those systems through land use, resource extraction, and environmental modification. In recent times, understanding these interactions has become increasingly important. Efforts to restore habitats, protect biodiversity, and reduce environmental impact are all attempts to align human systems more closely with the natural cycles that support life. The circle of life now includes human awareness of its own role within the system, adding a new layer of reflection to processes that have existed long before humans appeared. Yet even as we examine these global patterns, it is important to return to the quiet simplicity at the heart of the circle of life. Every organism experiences life in its own immediate context. A plant responds to sunlight. An animal searches for food. A microorganism interacts with its surroundings. These individual moments form the building blocks of larger systems. Life is experienced locally but connected globally. The smallest actions contribute to the largest patterns, and through this continuous accumulation of simple processes, the vast complexity of Earth's biosphere is maintained. As we approach the deeper edges of this reflection, the circle of life appears less like a concept to be defined, and more like a way of observing the world. It invites attention to relationships, processes, and continuity. It reveals that nothing exists in isolation and that every moment is part of something larger. Even silence in nature is not empty but filled with ongoing processes of change and renewal. Life continues in visible and invisible forms, across scales of time and space that extend far beyond human perception. And so, as we gently remain with these thoughts, the circle of life continues without interruption. It moves through forests and oceans, through soil and air, through cells and ecosystems, through past, present, and future, quietly sustaining the conditions for existence itself, always unfolding, always connected, and always becoming something new while remaining part of the same enduring pattern that has shaped our planet since the earliest beginnings of life. And as we remain with this idea of continuous becoming, it becomes easier to notice that the circle of life is also deeply tied to the flow of energy through the universe itself. On Earth, life depends on a steady input of energy, mostly from the sun, but that energy is ultimately part of a much larger cosmic history. The sun itself formed from earlier generations of stars, built from clouds of gas enriched by elements created in ancient stellar explosions. In a quiet scientific sense, the energy that supports life today began long before Earth existed. It has traveled through space and time, shifting forms, participating in cycles of creation and transformation that extend far beyond biology. When sunlight reaches Earth and is captured by living systems, it is joining a chain of energy transfer that stretches across astronomical scales. This connection between cosmic processes and biological life gives the circle of life a broader meaning, one that includes not only ecosystems, but the structure and history of the universe itself. Within living systems, energy is never static. It flows, transforms, and gradually disperses. A fundamental principle in physics known as entropy describes how energy tends to spread out over time. In simple terms, energy moves from concentrated forms to more evenly distributed forms unless work is done to maintain structure. Life appears to temporarily resist this dispersal by creating and maintaining order within itself. Cells organize molecules. Organisms build structures. Ecosystems maintain patterns of interaction. Yet this order is not permanent. It is continuously maintained through energy intake and constant transformation. The circle of life can therefore be seen as a delicate balance between order and dispersal, structure and change. Life does not stop entropy, but it participates in it in a way that creates temporary islands of organization within a constantly shifting environment. From a human perspective, it is easy to experience life as a sequence of separate moments, each one distinct from the last. But on a biological level, Continuity is always present, even when we are not consciously aware of it. Our bodies remain active. Breathing continues, circulation continues, cellular processes continue. The brain itself maintains patterns of electrical and chemical activity that support perception and awareness. These internal cycles mirror the broader cycles found in nature. Just as forests regenerate and oceans circulate nutrients, the human body regenerates tissues and circulates energy. In this way, human life is not separate from the natural world, but an expression of the same underlying processes. The circle of life includes human experience not as something outside of nature, but as one of its many forms. Time also plays a central role in shaping how life is experienced and understood. Different organisms perceive time in different ways based on their biological structures and lifespans. For a fast-reproducing microorganism, generations pass quickly, and evolutionary changes can occur over relatively short periods. For long-lived trees, time unfolds slowly, with growth and change occurring across centuries. For humans, time is experienced in a middle range, where individual lives are long enough to observe seasonal cycles, but short compared to many ecologicals and geological processes. This variation in temporal experience creates different perspectives on the same underlying reality. What appears as rapid change to one organism may appear as slow evolution to another. The circle of life operates across all these timescales simultaneously, weaving together processes that unfold in milliseconds, years, centuries, and millions of years. As we continue to explore these patterns, it becomes clear that boundaries in nature are often more fluid than they first appear. The distinction between living and non-living, individual and environment, organism and ecosystem, is not always sharp. Living systems depend on non-living materials, and non-living materials are constantly shaped by living processes. Soil becomes enriched by organic matter. Water becomes part of biological tissues. Air is altered by respiration and photosynthesis. Even rocks are gradually transformed by biological activity over long periods of time. This interconnectedness suggests that life is not separate from Earth but deeply embedded within it. The circle of life is also a circle of exchange, where distinctions blur and systems overlap in continuous interaction. At larger scales, this interconnectedness extends into planetary regulation. Earth's climate, atmosphere, oceans, and biosphere are linked through feedback systems that help maintain conditions suitable for life. Forests influence rainfall patterns, oceans regulate temperature, ice reflects sunlight and affects global energy balance. Living organisms participate in these systems in subtle but important ways. Over long periods, these interactions contribute to the stability of conditions that allow life to persist. Scientists sometimes refer to this integrated view as Earth system science, where the planet is understood as a single, interconnected system composed of many interacting parts. Within this framework, the circle of life becomes one expression of a larger planetary cycle, where biological, chemical, and physical processes are all intertwined. And so, as we gently continue through these reflections, it becomes possible to sense a kind of quiet unity within the complexity of nature. Life does not move in straight lines, but in patterns that loop, overlap, and return in new forms. Energy flows continuously through these patterns, never truly disappearing, only changing shape. Matter circulates through countless transformations, from stars to soil, from soil to organisms, from organisms back to the environment. Information passes through generations, adapting and evolving while maintaining continuity. Across all of this, life persists not as a single entity, but as a vast and ongoing process. And in that ongoing process, the circle of life continues its steady, uninterrupted unfolding, always present, always changing, and always connected across every scale of existence. When we continue following these patterns even further, beyond what is immediately visible in ecosystems and planetary systems, we begin to notice that life is also shaped by probabilities and variation at very small scales. At the molecular level, random motion plays a role in how substances interact. Molecules move constantly, colliding, separating, and recombining in ways that are influenced by temperature and environment. These small, random movements help drive many essential biological processes, including the way nutrients enter cells and how chemical reactions proceed. Even though individual molecular events may appear unpredictable, large-scale patterns remain consistent and stable. This combination of randomness and order is one of the quiet foundations of life. It allows systems to remain flexible while still preserving structure. The circle of life, in this sense, is not perfectly uniform or rigid, but gently shaped by countless small variations that together produce recognizable patterns over time. Mutation and genetic variation also arise from these microscopic processes. When biological information is copied, small changes can occasionally occur. Most of these changes are neutral or have little effect, but over long periods of time they contribute to diversity. This diversity is essential for adaptation. Without variation, populations would be less able to respond to environmental changes. Through natural selection, certain traits become more common if they improve survival or reproduction in a given environment. Over many generations, these small shifts accumulate, gradually shaping the evolution of species. The result is a living world that is both stable and continually changing. Species persist, but they also transform. Ecosystems endure, but they also evolve. The circle of life includes this slow unfolding of biological history, where every present moment carries traces of countless past adjustments and possibilities for future change. Another subtle aspect of life is the way boundaries between individuals are maintained. Every organism must regulate what enters and leaves its body. Cells are surrounded by membranes that control the movement of substances. These membranes are selectively permeable, allowing certain molecules to pass while restricting others. This controlled exchange is essential for maintaining internal balance. Without it, biological systems would quickly lose their organization. Yet even as boundaries are maintained, exchange is constant. Nutrients enter, waste leaves, energy flows in and out. Life depends on this careful balance between separation and connection. Organisms must remain distinct enough to function as individuals, yet open enough to interact with their environment. The circle of life exists within this tension, where separation and connection coexist in a continuous state of regulated exchange. As we observe ecosystems more closely, we also see that cooperation often extends beyond direct relationships. Indirect interactions can shape the structure of entire communities. For example, one species may influence another not by interacting with it directly, but by affecting a third species that connects them both. These indirect pathways create complex networks of influence. Ecologists sometimes describe ecosystems as webs of interaction rather than simple chains because of this complexity. Within these webs, changes in one part of the system can ripple outward in unexpected ways. A shift in plant growth can influence herbivore populations, which in turn affect predators, which may then influence vegetation again. These feedback loops create dynamic systems that adjust continuously over time. The circle of life is therefore not only composed of direct exchanges, but also of indirect relationships that shape the behavior of ecosystems in subtle but important ways. In many environments, life also demonstrates remarkable efficiency in the use of resources. Very little material is truly wasted in natural systems. What is discarded by one organism often becomes useful to another. Fallen leaves become soil nutrients. Animal waste becomes fertilizer for plants. Dead organisms support decomposers. Even within living bodies, waste products are often repurposed or transformed. This efficiency has developed over billions of years of evolution, resulting in ecosystems that are highly interconnected and resource-conscious. Unlike many human systems that can produce large amounts of unused material, natural systems tend to reintegrate outputs back into ongoing cycles. The circle of life is therefore also a circle of reuse, where materials are continuously transformed and reintroduced into biological processes. If we look at life from the perspective of long-term change, another important pattern becomes visible: extinction and emergence. Throughout Earth's history, many species have disappeared, while new ones have appeared. Extinction is a natural part of the evolutionary process. It can occur due to environmental changes, competition, or random events. When species disappear, ecological spaces open, allowing new forms of life to evolve and adapt. Over time, this process has led to the extraordinary diversity of life we see today. Although extinction may seem like an ending, it is also part of a broader cycle of transformation. The circle of life includes both continuity and replacement, where older forms give way to new ones, and the overall system continues evolving. In parallel with these biological processes, Earth's physical environment continues to shift in ways that influence life. Climate patterns change over long periods due to variations in Earth's orbit, atmospheric composition, and geological activity. Ice ages come and go, sea levels rise and fall, habitats expand and contract. Living organisms respond to these changes through migration, adaptation, and evolution. These long-term cycles have shaped the distribution of life across the planet. Species that once existed in one region may now be found in entirely different environments or may have adapted to new conditions over time. The circle of life is therefore deeply connected to Earth's long-term rhythms, which influence the direction and pace of biological change. As we reflect on these patterns, it becomes increasingly clear that life cannot be fully understood by focusing on individual parts in isolation. It is the relationships between parts that create the overall structure. Energy, matter, and information flow through systems in interconnected ways. Organisms interact with each other and with their environment continuously. Change is constant, but it is guided by underlying principles that repeat across scales. These principles do not impose strict order, but rather allow for flexibility within structure. Life is shaped by this balance, where stability emerges from constant movement and continuity arises from ongoing transformation. And so, as this slow exploration continues, the circle of life remains present in every direction we observe. It is in the smallest molecular interactions and in the largest planetary cycles. It is in the quiet processes of growth and decay, in the visible rhythms of ecosystems, and in the invisible exchanges that sustain all living systems. It is not a single path or a fixed loop, but a living pattern that adapts, expands, and renews itself endlessly, carrying forward the continuity of existence through every moment, across every scale, and through every form that life takes on Earth. As we continue moving deeper into the long unfolding patterns of life, it becomes possible to notice something very quiet but fundamental. Life is always balanced between persistence and impermanence. Nothing living remains exactly the same, yet nothing is ever completely lost either. A forest today is not the same forest it was 100 years ago, yet it is still recognized as part of a continuous system. The trees change, the animals shift, the soil slowly transforms, and the climate subtly influences growth patterns. Even so, the identity of the ecosystem persists through its ongoing processes, rather than through fixed structure. This idea applies to all living systems. Continuity is not maintained by freezing conditions in place, but by allowing constant renewal within a stable framework of interaction. The circle of life is therefore not a static loop, but a living continuity that preserves itself through change rather than despite it. At the level of individual organisms, this balance between change and continuity becomes even more evident. Every living being is a temporary arrangement of matter and energy, yet it maintains a coherent identity through time. A human body, for example, continuously replaces its internal components. Cells are renewed, molecules are exchanged, and energy flows in and out. Despite this ongoing transformation, the organism remains recognizable as the same individual. This suggests that identity in biological systems is not tied to unchanging material, but to patterns of organization and function. As long as these patterns persist, the organism continues. When they can no longer be maintained, the organism's structure dissolves, and its components return to broader ecological cycles. In this way, individuality is both real and temporary, a stable pattern sustained within a larger flow. This perspective also helps us understand how ecosystems maintain coherence across long periods of time. Even as species come and go and environmental conditions shift, ecosystems preserve certain functional roles. Energy must still flow from producers to consumers. Nutrients must still cycle through decomposition and regeneration. Water must still move through evaporation, precipitation, and absorption. These processes are not dependent on specific species, but on the relationships between them. If one species disappears, another may take its place in a similar role. This functional continuity allows ecosystems to persist even as their components change. The circle of life is therefore structured around processes rather than fixed identities. It is the continuity of function, not form, that sustains the living world over time. As we extend our view even further, we can consider how life interacts with the passage of deep time. Geological layers preserve traces of ancient ecosystems, recording changes in climate, biodiversity, and environmental conditions. Fossils reveal that Earth's living world has undergone many transformations. Entire groups of organisms have appeared and disappeared. Continents have shifted positions. Oceans have formed and closed. Yet throughout all of this, the presence of life has remained continuous. Even when conditions changed dramatically, life adapted, diversified, and re-established itself in new forms. This resilience over geological time highlights one of the most remarkable qualities of living systems. They are not fragile in the long-term sense, but deeply adaptive. The circle of life has persisted through immense changes in Earth's history, continually reconfiguring itself in response to shifting conditions. Within this vast timeline, small-scale cycles continue without interruption. Microorganisms still cycle nutrients. Plants still convert sunlight into chemical energy. Animals still interact through feeding relationships. Decomposition still returns material to the soil. These processes operate continuously, regardless of larger environmental changes. Even during periods of instability or transition, the fundamental cycles of life persist. This continuity across scales suggests that life is not dependent on specific conditions remaining unchanged, but on its ability to reorganize itself within whatever conditions are present. The circle of life is therefore both stable and adaptable, maintaining its core processes even as its context evolves. Another important aspect of this system is the way life responds to limits. Every environment has constraints, such as available energy, space, nutrients, and time. Organisms must operate within these limits, and these constraints help shape the structure of ecosystems. Rather than preventing life, limits often guide its diversity. Different species specialize in different roles, occupying different niches within the same environment. This division of roles allows many forms of life to coexist by reducing direct competition. In this way, limitations contribute to complexity. The circle of life is shaped not only by abundance, but also by restriction, where boundaries create opportunities for variation and specialization. Even in environments that appear harsh or extreme, life finds ways to persist. In deserts, organisms adapt to conserve water and withstand temperature fluctuations. In polar regions, species develop strategies to survive extreme cold and seasonal darkness. In deep underground environments, microbial life exists in conditions of limited energy availability. These examples demonstrate that life is not confined to comfortable conditions. Instead, it is capable of adapting to a wide range of environments by modifying its structure, behavior, and metabolic processes. The circle of life extends into these diverse habitats, showing that biological systems are defined not by uniformity, but by adaptability. At the same time, life is deeply sensitive to balance. Small changes in environmental conditions can sometimes lead to significant shifts in ecosystems. Temperature, resource availability, and species interactions all influence stability. When conditions remain within certain ranges, systems can maintain their structure. When they move beyond those ranges, transformations may occur. These shifts are part of the natural dynamics of ecosystems, but they highlight the delicate equilibrium in which life operates. The circle of life depends on a continuous balance between change and stability. where systems are constantly adjusting to maintain functionality. As we continue reflecting on these patterns, it becomes increasingly clear that life is not a collection of isolated events, but a continuous unfolding process. Each moment is connected to previous moments through chains of causation and transformation. Each future moment emerges from the conditions created in the present. This creates a seamless flow of existence, where beginnings and endings are not absolute boundaries, but transitions within ongoing processes. Life is experienced as discrete events, but fundamentally it is continuous. The circle of life expresses this continuity through cycles that repeat, transform, and evolve without ever fully stopping. And so, as we gently remain within this long reflection, the circle of life continues to reveal itself not as something separate from existence, but as the structure of existence itself. It is present in every interaction, every transformation, every exchange of energy and matter, and every moment of renewal. It does not move toward a final destination, but unfolds endlessly across time, maintaining continuity through change and coherence through motion, always present, always evolving, and always quietly sustaining the living fabric of Earth. As we continue along this quiet path of observation, it becomes possible to notice that the circle of life is not only about what is happening on Earth today, but also about how life carries its history forward in subtle and persistent ways. Every organism is, in a sense, a living archive of past environments. The traits that survive within populations are those that have been shaped by countless generations of interaction with changing conditions. Even behaviors that seem simple often reflect long evolutionary histories. A bird building a nest, a fish following a migration route, or a plant adjusting its growth toward light are all expressions of deep biological memory encoded through adaptation. This memory is not conscious in the way human memory is, but it is equally real in its effects. It is written into the structure of cells, the timing of biological cycles, and the relationships between organisms. The circle of life carries this accumulated history forward, not as static record, but as living process. Within this ongoing flow, adaptation is one of the most fundamental mechanisms that allows life to persist. Adaptation does not occur suddenly, but through gradual adjustments across many generations. Small differences in survival and reproduction influence which traits become more common over time. These changes accumulate slowly, shaping populations in response to environmental conditions. What is important to understand is that adaptation is not directed toward a specific goal. It is not a process that aims at perfection. Instead, it is a continuous response to present conditions. As those conditions change, so too does the direction of adaptation. This creates a dynamic relationship between life and environment, where both influence each other over time. The circle of life includes this constant adjustment, where stability is achieved not by resisting change, but by integrating it. Another subtle but important aspect of life is the role of redundancy. Many biological systems include overlapping functions that can compensate for failure or change. In ecosystems, multiple species may perform similar ecological roles. In organisms, multiple pathways may support the same essential function. This redundancy provides resilience. If one pathway is disrupted, others can continue maintaining the system. At first glance, redundancy might seem inefficient, but in biological systems it is a source of stability. It allows life to persist under unpredictable conditions. The circle of life depends on this layered structure of support, where multiple interconnected processes ensure that essential functions continue even when individual components are altered or removed. When we examine the smallest units of life more closely, we find that cooperation is not limited to large organisms or visible ecosystems. Even single cells contain cooperative interactions among molecular components. Proteins interact in complex networks to carry out cellular functions. Energy molecules are shared and transformed through coordinated reactions. Genetic material is expressed in regulated sequences that depend on multiple interacting factors. These internal processes are highly organized, yet flexible enough to respond to changing conditions. Life at this scale is a constant negotiation between stability and responsiveness. The circle of life is present even within a single cell, where molecular systems continuously maintain balance through interaction and adjustment. As we expand our view outward again, we can consider how life responds to large-scale environmental cycles that operate over long periods of time. Earth's climate has changed repeatedly throughout its history, alternating between warmer and cooler periods. These changes influence the distribution of ecosystems and the evolution of species. During warmer periods, certain environments expand while others contract. During cooler periods, different adaptations become advantageous. Life responds to these cycles not as a single coordinated system, but through countless independent adjustments across populations and ecosystems. Over time, these responses shape the diversity of life on Earth. The circle of life therefore includes not only continuous processes, but also long rhythms of environmental change that influence how life evolves and spreads. Another important dimension of this system is the way energy efficiency shapes biological structures. Over time, natural selection tends to favor processes that use energy effectively within given constraints. This does not mean that all systems become perfectly efficient, but that they tend to function well enough to support survival and reproduction. Energy is always limited, and organisms must allocate it between growth, maintenance, reproduction, and response to environmental conditions. These trade-offs influence the structure of life at every level. Ecosystems reflect these energy flows, with each level depending on the transfer of energy from one form to another. The circle of life is fundamentally an energy-based system, where the movement and transformation of energy determine the structure and behavior of living systems. At the same time, life is not only about efficiency or survival. It also produces complexity and diversity that emerge naturally from simple rules and interactions. From relatively simple biological principles such as reproduction, variation, and selection, an extraordinary variety of forms has emerged over time. This diversity is not accidental, but the result of long-term processes operating across countless environments. Different conditions lead to different outcomes, and over time, this produces a wide range of life forms adapted to specific niches. The circle of life therefore includes both unity and diversity, where common processes give rise to vastly different expressions. When we observe ecosystems in their entirety, we can see that they are constantly in motion, even when they appear stable. Populations fluctuate, resources shift, and interactions evolve. Yet within this movement, patterns remain recognizable. Energy continues to flow, nutrients continue to cycle, organisms continue to interact. This combination of stability and change creates a dynamic equilibrium that allows life to persist over long periods of time. The circle of life is not a fixed balance point, but a moving balance, continuously adjusting to internal and external changes. And so, as we remain within this gentle exploration, the idea of the circle of life becomes less like a concept and more like a way of seeing. It reveals that existence is not composed of isolated parts, but of relationships that extend across time and space. Every process is connected to others. Every moment is part of a larger sequence. Every form of life participates in ongoing cycles of transformation. Nothing exists entirely alone, and nothing remains unchanged forever. The circle continues quietly, not as repetition of the same events, but as continuous renewal shaped by the flow of energy, matter, and time through the living world. As we continue moving through these slow layers of understanding, it becomes increasingly clear that life is not only defined by visible organisms, but also by invisible interactions that shape every environment. Air, water, and soil are not passive backdrops for life, but active mediums through which countless exchanges take place. In every breath, gases are exchanged between organisms and the atmosphere. In every drop of rain, minerals are transported across landscapes. In every handful of soil, microscopic life forms are continuously processing organic and inorganic material. These interactions are so constant and widespread that they form a kind of silent infrastructure supporting all ecosystems. The circle of life is built upon these invisible foundations, where processes that cannot be seen directly, still determine the conditions under which visible life can exist. Within this hidden world, microorganisms play an especially important role. They are often the first to respond to changes in the environment, and their activities influence the availability of nutrients for all other forms of life. Some break down complex organic matter into simpler compounds. Others transform chemical elements into forms that can be used by plants. Some live in symbiotic relationships with larger organisms, supporting their nutrition or health. Although individually microscopic, their collective impact is vast. Without microbial life, nutrient cycles would slow dramatically, and many ecosystems would lose their ability to sustain more complex organisms. The circle of life depends on this microscopic layer of activity, where transformation happens continuously at scales far below direct human perception. Another important dimension of life is its tendency to form networks of interdependence. In nearly every ecosystem, organisms are linked through multiple pathways of interaction. A change in one species can influence many others, sometimes in ways that are not immediately obvious. For example, a plant species may support a specific group of insects, which in turn serve as food for birds, which then influence seed dispersal patterns for other plants. These chains and webs of interaction create complex systems where effects can travel in multiple directions. This interconnectedness means that no organism exists in complete isolation. The circle of life is not a simple loop, but a branching network where each node is connected to many others through direct and indirect relationships. As we consider these networks, it becomes important to recognize that stability in ecosystems often arises from diversity. When many different species perform overlapping roles, the system becomes more capable of absorbing change. If one species declines, others may continue performing similar functions. This redundancy creates resilience, allowing ecosystems to persist even when conditions fluctuate. Diversity also increases the range of responses available to environmental challenges. Different species may respond differently to the same change, ensuring that some components of the system continue functioning. The circle of life is therefore strengthened by variation, where differences between organisms contribute to the overall stability of the system. Even within individual life cycles, there are patterns of transition that reflect broader ecological cycles. Organisms pass through stages of growth, maturity, reproduction, and decline. Each stage plays a role in the continuation of life. Young organisms contribute to population growth and dispersal. Mature organisms contribute to reproduction and ecosystem interactions. Older organisms contribute to nutrient cycling through decay. These stages are not separate from the ecosystem but integrated into it. Life is structured in such a way that each phase supports others, creating continuity across generations. The circle of life is expressed not only across species, but within the life cycle of each organism itself. At larger scales, seasonal and climatic cycles continue to influence these patterns. Changes in temperature, rainfall, and daylight shape biological activity across regions. In some environments, life becomes highly active during certain seasons and slows during others. In others, conditions remain relatively stable, allowing continuous activity throughout the year. These cycles create rhythms that organize biological processes across time. Migration, reproduction, growth, and dormancy are often synchronized with environmental conditions. This alignment between biological timing and environmental cycles helps maintain stability in ecosystems. The circle of life is therefore synchronized with planetary rhythms, where life adjusts itself to the repeating patterns of Earth's environment. Another quiet but significant aspect of life is the way it transforms energy into structure. Living organisms do not simply consume energy, they use it to build and maintain organization. This includes the formation of tissues, the maintenance of internal balance, and the creation of structures that support survival. Over time, these processes produce the diversity of forms we observe in nature. Energy from the sun ultimately becomes incorporated into biological systems, shaping everything from the growth of plants to the movement of animals. This transformation of energy into living structure is one of the defining features of life. The circle of life is therefore also a transformation cycle. where energy moves through systems and becomes temporarily organized into living forms before continuing its flow. As we observe these patterns across time and space, a deeper continuity becomes apparent. Life does not operate through isolated events, but through ongoing processes that extend beyond individual lifetimes. Each organism is part of a larger sequence that began long before its existence and will continue long after. This sequence is maintained through reproduction, ecological interaction, and environmental change. It is not directed toward a final endpoint, but unfolds continuously, adapting to conditions as they evolve. The circle of life is therefore not a closed system with a beginning and end, but an open and ongoing process that maintains itself through transformation. In this sense, even endings are part of continuity. The conclusion of one organism's life contributes to the beginning of many other processes. Nutrients return to the environment, energy flows into other systems, and space becomes available for new growth. What appears as an end from one perspective becomes a transition from another. This perspective reveals that life is not defined by permanence, but by ongoing participation in cycles of change. The circle of life is built on this principle of transformation, where every ending becomes a continuation in a different form. And so, as we gently remain with these ideas, the pattern continues without interruption. Life moves through systems of exchange, adaptation, and renewal. It connects microscopic processes to global systems and individual moments to vast stretches of time. It is present in every interaction, every cycle, and every transformation that shapes the living world. The circle of life continues not as repetition of the same, but as continuous unfolding, where each moment contributes to an ongoing pattern of existence that is always changing, yet always connected. As we continue this slow movement through the deeper structure of life, it becomes natural to notice how closely biological systems are tied to cycles that exist far beyond living organisms themselves. The rotation of Earth creates day and night, shaping patterns of activity and rest across nearly all ecosystems. The tilt of Earth's axis creates seasons, influencing growth, migration, and reproduction. The orbit of Earth around the Sun defines the rhythm of the year, a cycle that many species have integrated into their biology over long periods of evolution. These astronomical patterns are not merely background conditions. They actively structure the timing of life on Earth. The circle of life is therefore synchronized with cosmic cycles, where biological processes are aligned with the steady movements of the planet through space. Within this broader framework, even seemingly small environmental signals carry deep significance for living organisms. The length of daylight, for example, can influence hormonal changes in animals, triggering behaviors such as breeding, migration, or dormancy. Temperature shifts can alter metabolic rates and growth patterns. Moisture levels can determine whether seeds remain dormant or begin to germinate. These environmental cues are interpreted by organisms through biological systems that have evolved sensitivity to their surroundings. Over time, this sensitivity has allowed life to become finely tuned to the conditions of Earth. The circle of life is shaped by this constant reading of the environment, where organisms respond continuously to signals that guide their behavior and development. At the same time, life is not only reactive, but also proactive in shaping its surroundings. Plants, for instance, modify local environments by providing shade, retaining moisture, and influencing soil composition. Forests can alter regional climates by affecting humidity and temperature. Large populations of organisms can change atmospheric composition over time through collective biological activity. These feedback loops demonstrate that life is both influenced by and influential upon its environment. The circle of life is therefore a two-way process, where organisms and environments continuously shape each other in an ongoing exchange of influence. When we consider the long history of life on Earth, it becomes clear that complexity has increased gradually over time. Early life forms were simple, consisting of single cells without specialized structures. Over billions of years, these simple forms gave rise to increasingly complex organisms, including multicellular life, specialized tissues, and highly organized systems. This increasing complexity did not occur in a straight line, but through branching evolutionary pathways shaped by environmental conditions and random variation. Some lineages became more complex, while others remained simple or adapted in different ways. The circle of life includes this long evolutionary expansion, where diversity and complexity emerge from simple beginnings through continuous processes of change. Yet complexity does not necessarily mean fragility. In many cases, complex systems are highly adaptable. The human body, for example, consists of numerous interacting systems that maintain balance through regulation and feedback. The nervous system, immune system, circulatory system, and digestive system all work together to sustain life. Each system depends on the others, creating a network of interdependence. If one part is affected, others adjust to compensate. This internal coordination allows organisms to function across a wide range of conditions. The circle of life is reflected within the body itself, where multiple systems interact to maintain stability through constant adjustment. At the level of ecosystems, similar principles apply. Stability often arises not from uniformity, but from interaction among diverse components. Forests, oceans, grasslands, and wetlands all depend on interactions among many species performing different roles. These roles include producers, consumers, decomposers, and a wide range of intermediate functions. Energy flows through these systems in multiple pathways, creating redundancy and flexibility. This structure allows ecosystems to persist even when conditions change. The circle of life is therefore supported by diversity, not only in species, but also in the ways those species interact. Another important feature of living systems is their ability to recover from disruption. After disturbances such as fires, storms, or floods, ecosystems often begin a process of regeneration. Early stages of recovery are typically characterized by fast-growing species that stabilize conditions. Over time, more complex communities develop, gradually restoring ecological balance. This process, known as ecological succession, demonstrates that change is not only disruptive but also generative. Disturbance creates opportunities for renewal, allowing ecosystems to reorganize in new forms. The circle of life includes these cycles of disruption and recovery, where endings become the starting point for new phases of growth. Within individual organisms, similar cycles of repair and renewal occur continuously. Tissues regenerate, cells are replaced, and internal systems adjust to changing conditions. Even during periods of rest, biological processes continue at a slower pace, maintaining essential functions. This constant internal activity ensures that organisms remain capable of responding to external changes. Life is therefore not a static condition, but an ongoing process of maintenance and adjustment. The circle of life is present within every organism as a continuous cycle of renewal that operates throughout its existence. As we expand our view further, it becomes apparent that life is deeply embedded in the chemistry of the planet. Elements such as carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, and sulfur cycle through living and non-living systems in continuous exchange. These elements form the building blocks of biological molecules, including proteins, carbohydrates, lipids, and nucleic acids. Through processes such as photosynthesis, respiration, decomposition, and nutrient cycling, these elements are constantly transformed and reused. This chemical continuity links all forms of life together, regardless of species or environment. The circle of life is therefore also a chemical cycle, where matter itself moves through living systems in continuous transformation. Over long periods of time, these cycles contribute to the evolution of Earth itself. The presence of life has altered the composition of the atmosphere, influenced the formation of soils, and affected the chemistry of oceans. These changes have, in turn, influenced the development of new forms of life. This mutual shaping of Earth and life creates a system in which biology and geology are deeply intertwined. The circle of life is not separate from Earth's history but is an integral part of it, woven into the physical and chemical evolution of the planet. As we gently remain with this understanding, the continuity of life becomes increasingly apparent. It is not defined by isolated events, but by ongoing processes that extend across time and space. Energy flows, matter cycles, information persists, and relationships evolve. Every organism participates in these processes, contributing to the larger system through simple acts of existence. Life does not require awareness of the whole system to be part of it. It participates naturally through the basic functions of growth, interaction, and renewal. And through this participation, the circle of life continues without interruption, unfolding quietly across every scale of existence, always changing, yet always connected within the vast and ongoing rhythm of nature. As we continue deeper into this long and quiet observation of life, another subtle pattern begins to appear. Life is not only structured by cycles of matter and energy, but also by patterns of limitation that shape what is possible within any environment. Every ecosystem operates within boundaries set by temperature, available energy, nutrient supply, and physical space. These limitations are not obstacles in the simple sense, but defining conditions that guide how life develops. Within deserts, scarcity of water shapes drought-resistant adaptations. In oceans, pressure and light availability determine where different organisms can survive. In forests, competition for sunlight influences growth patterns and vertical structure. The circle of life unfolds within these constraints, not by overcoming them completely, but by adapting to them in ways that create diverse forms of existence. This relationship between limitation and adaptation gives rise to specialization. Over long periods of time, organisms become finely tuned to particular roles within their environments. Some species specialize in breaking down organic material. Others specialize in capturing energy from sunlight. Some evolve to occupy narrow ecological niches, while others remain flexible and adaptable across multiple conditions. Specialization allows ecosystems to function efficiently by distributing roles among different organisms. At the same time, it creates interdependence, since each specialized role often relies on the presence of others. The circle of life is therefore structured through networks of dependence, where the survival of each part is linked to the functioning of the whole system. Even at the level of behavior, specialization is visible. Animals develop feeding strategies, migration patterns, and social structures that reflect their ecological roles. Some species form long-term cooperative groups, while others operate more independently. Some rely on camouflage, while others use speed or strength. These behavioral adaptations emerge gradually through evolutionary processes and are refined over time through interaction with the environment. Behavior becomes another layer through which the circle of life expresses itself, linking internal biological systems with external ecological conditions. At the same time, unpredictability remains an essential part of life. Environmental conditions do not remain constant, and random events can influence biological outcomes. Storms, fires, droughts, and sudden shifts in resource availability introduce variability into ecosystems. On a smaller scale, random genetic changes introduce variation within populations. This unpredictability ensures that life is never entirely fixed or predictable. Instead, it remains open to change. The circle of life includes this element of uncertainty, where variation becomes a driving force for adaptation and long-term diversity. Within this framework, survival is not guaranteed by strength alone, but by flexibility. Organisms that can adjust to changing conditions are more likely to persist over time. Flexibility can take many forms, including behavioral changes, physiological adjustments, or evolutionary adaptations. In ecosystems that experience frequent change, flexibility becomes especially important. It allows systems to reorganize without losing their fundamental structure. The circle of life is therefore supported not only by stability, but by the capacity for adjustment at every level of organization. As we observe life across different environments, it becomes clear that no single form of organization dominates entirely. Instead, multiple strategies coexist. Some ecosystems are highly dynamic, with frequent change and rapid turnover. Others are relatively stable, with slow rates of change and long-lived organisms. Both types of systems are successful in their own contexts. This diversity of ecological organization reflects the adaptability of life itself. The circle of life is not uniform across the planet, but expressed differently depending on environmental conditions and historical development. One of the most important underlying features of all these systems is feedback. Feedback occurs when the output of a process influences the process itself. In ecosystems, feedback loops regulate population sizes, resource availability, and environmental conditions. For example, an increase in plant growth can lead to greater herbivore populations, which may then reduce plant growth, creating a balancing loop. Similarly, climate conditions can influence vegetation, which in turn can influence climate through processes such as water evaporation and carbon exchange. These feedback systems help maintain balance within ecosystems, preventing extreme fluctuations under normal conditions. The circle of life depends on these feedback mechanisms to maintain continuity over time. At the same time, not all feedback is stabilizing. Some feedback loops can amplify change, leading to rapid transformations in ecosystems. These processes can result in shifts from one stable state to another. For example, gradual changes in temperature or resource availability can eventually push ecosystems into new configurations. Once a threshold is crossed, the system reorganizes itself into a different structure. These transitions are part of natural ecological dynamics and contribute to the long-term evolution of life on Earth. The circle of life therefore includes both stabilizing and transformative feedback, where systems can either maintain their structure or shift into new forms depending on conditions. When we step back and consider these patterns together, a deeper unity becomes visible. Life is composed of cycles within cycles, where processes operate at different scales but remain interconnected. Cellular processes support organisms, organisms support ecosystems, ecosystems interact with planetary systems, and planetary systems are influenced by cosmic cycles. Each level is nested within larger systems, forming a continuous hierarchy of interactions. This nested structure allows life to exist simultaneously at multiple scales, each influencing and being influenced by others. The circle of life is therefore not a single loop, but a vast network of overlapping cycles extending across all levels of existence. Even the passage of time itself becomes part of this structure. Biological processes are shaped by time, but they also give meaning to time through their rhythms. Growth, decay, reproduction, and regeneration create patterns that define how life unfolds. Without these processes, time would be an abstract measure. With them, it becomes a lived experience of change and continuity. The circle of life gives structure to time through repeating patterns that organize biological activity across scales. And so, as this long observation continues, the circle of life reveals itself not as a simple concept, but as the underlying structure of living reality. It is present in every interaction, every transformation, every cycle of renewal, and every adjustment to change. It is expressed through energy, matter, information, behavior, and environment. It connects the smallest molecular processes to the largest planetary systems, and through all of this, it continues without interruption, unfolding quietly and continuously, shaping and being shaped by the living world in an ongoing process that has no final point, only continuous becoming. As we continue this gradual unfolding of understanding, it becomes increasingly clear that life is not only a set of biological processes, but also a continuous negotiation between stability and change. Every living system, from the smallest cell to the largest ecosystem, must maintain internal order while also responding to external variation. This balance is never fully complete or permanent, it is constantly being adjusted. Cells regulate their internal chemistry while reacting to signals from their environment. Organisms maintain homeostasis while adapting to temperature, food availability, and other conditions. Ecosystems stabilize through feedback loops while shifting in response to long-term environmental trends. The circle of life exists within this ongoing negotiation, where order is never fixed but continuously maintained through interaction. One of the most important mechanisms supporting this balance is regulation. Regulation occurs at many levels of biological organization. Within cells, enzymes control chemical reactions, ensuring that processes occur at appropriate rates. Within organisms, hormones coordinate growth, metabolism, and reproduction. Within ecosystems, population dynamics and resource availability help regulate species interactions. These regulatory systems are not centralized but distributed, emerging from the interaction of many components. This distributed control allows life to remain flexible while still maintaining coherence. The circle of life depends on these regulatory networks, which ensure that systems remain functional even as conditions change. At the same time, life is shaped by thresholds. A threshold is a point at which small changes can lead to significant shifts in behavior or structure. In biology, thresholds appear in many forms. A slight increase in temperature can affect enzyme activity. A small change in resource availability can influence population growth. A gradual environmental shift can eventually lead to a change in ecosystem type. These thresholds are important because they introduce nonlinear behavior into living systems. Instead of responding in simple proportional ways, systems can remain stable for a time and then change rapidly once a threshold is crossed. The circle of life includes these points of transition where gradual accumulation leads to transformation. Another important feature of life is modularity. Many biological systems are organized into repeating units, or modules, that can function somewhat independently. Cells are modular units within organisms. Organs are modular systems within bodies. Ecosystems can be seen as modular arrangements of habitats and communities. This modular structure allows for flexibility and resilience. If one module is affected, others can continue functioning. Modularity also allows for evolutionary innovation, as new structures can emerge by modifying existing units rather than building entirely new systems from scratch. The circle of life is supported by this modular organization, which enables both stability and adaptation. When we look at life through the lens of energy flow, another consistent pattern emerges. Energy enters ecosystems primarily through photosynthesis or chemical processes. It is then transferred through food webs as organisms consume one another. At each step, some energy is used for biological functions, while some is lost as heat. This flow creates a directional movement of energy through ecosystems. Unlike matter, which cycles and recycles, energy moves in a more linear direction before ultimately dispersing into the environment. Life continuously captures and transforms this energy to maintain structure and function. The circle of life is therefore not only a cycle of matter, but also a flow of energy moving through systems while sustaining biological organization. At the same time, information flows alongside energy and matter. Genetic information is passed from one generation to the next through reproduction. Behavioral information is transmitted through learning, interaction, and environmental cues. Ecological information is embedded in the relationships between species and their surroundings. This flow of information allows life to adapt, respond, and evolve. Unlike physical materials, information can be copied, modified, and shared without being consumed. It accumulates over time, shaping the development of organisms and ecosystems. The circle of life includes this informational dimension, where patterns of structure and behavior are preserved and transformed across generations. As we observe these layers together, it becomes apparent that life is not a single process, but a convergence of many interacting processes. Chemical cycles, energy flows, information transfer, ecological interactions, and evolutionary change all occur simultaneously. Each process influences the others, creating a complex web of interdependence. This interconnectedness means that no single aspect of life can be fully understood in isolation. The circle of life is the combined result of all these processes operating together across different scales of time and space. In this system, even randomness plays a constructive role. Random variations introduce new possibilities into biological systems. Without variation, there would be no change, no adaptation, and no evolution. Randomness interacts with selection processes to produce structure over time. It is not chaos without meaning, but a source of diversity that allows systems to explore different configurations. The circle of life includes this interplay between randomness and structure, where unpredictability contributes to long-term stability by enabling adaptation over extended periods. These processes give rise to patterns that repeat with variation. Seasons follow predictable cycles, but each year is slightly different. Generations succeed one another, but each is shaped by unique conditions. Ecosystems persist, but their composition changes over time. This combination of repetition and variation creates a rhythm that defines the living world. It is neither perfectly uniform nor entirely unpredictable, but a continuous interplay of both. The circle of life expresses this rhythm, where patterns recur while always allowing for change. When viewed across the full span of Earth's history, life appears as a long sequence of transformations connected by continuity. Ancient environments gave rise to early forms of life, which gradually evolved into more complex systems. These systems diversified, adapted, and spread across the planet. Extinctions and environmental shifts altered the course of evolution, but life persisted through each transition. The forms have changed, but the underlying processes have remained. The circle of life is this continuity of process across changing forms, a thread that links past, present, and future through ongoing transformation. And so, as this reflection continues, the circle of life reveals itself once again not as a single loop or simple structure, but as a deeply layered system of continuous interaction. It exists wherever matter, energy, and information flow through living systems. It persists through change, adapts through variation, and maintains coherence through regulation and feedback. It is always in motion, always adjusting, and always continuing, forming the quiet and unbroken foundation upon which all life unfolds. As we continue this long, slow observation, it becomes possible to notice that life is not only structured by cycles and flows, but also by layers of scale that exist within one another. Each scale of life, from molecules to ecosystems, follows similar patterns, yet expresses them in different forms. At the smallest level, molecules interact through chemical reactions that build the foundation of biological activity. At the cellular level, these molecules are organized into systems that sustain life functions. At the level of organisms, cells are coordinated into complex bodies capable of movement, perception, and interaction. At the ecosystem level, organisms interact with each other and with their environment to form stable but dynamic communities. Each layer depends on the others, and none exists in isolation. The circle of life is therefore not a single ring, but a nested structure of repeating patterns unfolding across different scales. Within this nested structure, one of the most important features is emergence. Emergence occurs when simple interactions between components give rise to complex behaviors at a larger scale. A single cell follows basic chemical rules, yet a collection of cells can form tissues, organs, and entire organisms with highly organized functions. Similarly, individual organisms follow basic survival behaviors, yet together they form ecosystems with complex dynamics. These emergent properties cannot be fully understood by examining individual parts alone. They arise from interactions within the system. The circle of life depends on emergence, where complexity is not imposed from above but arises naturally from the relationships between components. As we observe these emergent systems more closely, we begin to see that coordination in nature often happens without central control. Many biological systems function through local interactions rather than top-down direction. Ant colonies, for example, organize collective behavior through simple individual rules followed by each ant. Bird flocks move in coordinated patterns based on the movement of nearby individuals. Fish schools adjust direction and speed through local sensing. Even within cells, coordination emerges from molecular interactions without centralized command. This distributed form of organization allows systems to be flexible and responsive. The circle of life is shaped by this decentralized coordination, where order emerges from interaction rather than instruction. Another subtle but important aspect of life is timing. Biological processes do not occur randomly in time but are often carefully synchronized. Cells divide according to internal cycles. Organisms reproduce at specific times of year. Ecosystems follow seasonal rhythms. Even at the molecular level, certain reactions occur in sequences that depend on precise timing. This temporal organization ensures that processes occur in the correct order and context. Without proper timing, biological systems would lose coordination. The circle of life is therefore also a circle of timing, where sequences of events unfold in structured patterns across time. As we extend this view further, we see that life is deeply dependent on gradients. A gradient is a gradual change in a property such as temperature, concentration, or energy. Many biological processes rely on gradients to function. Nutrients move from areas of high concentration to low concentration. Heat flows from warmer regions to cooler ones. Electrical gradients across membranes allow cells to generate energy and transmit signals. Without gradients, movement and exchange would not occur. Life depends on differences, and these differences drive flow and transformation. The circle of life is supported by these gradients, which create the conditions for continuous movement and exchange. At the same time, life often acts to maintain or regulate gradients. Organisms use energy to maintain internal conditions that differ from their external environment. Cells maintain concentration differences across membranes, bodies regulate temperature and chemical balance, ecosystems can influence atmospheric and chemical gradients over long periods. This interplay between maintaining and responding to gradients creates dynamic stability. Systems are never fully equalized, yet never completely unstable. The circle of life exists within this tension, where gradients are both used and regulated to sustain ongoing processes. Another important dimension of life is adaptation across space. Organisms do not exist uniformly across the planet, but are distributed according to environmental conditions. Each species occupies a range where conditions support its survival. Within these ranges, populations may vary in density and behavior depending on local conditions. Over time, these spatial patterns shift as environments change. Migration, dispersal, and colonization allow life to expand into new areas or retreat from others. This spatial movement contributes to the dynamic nature of ecosystems. The circle of life is not confined to a single location, but spreads across landscapes, oceans, and atmospheric layers, constantly adjusting to spatial variation. As we observe life across both space and time, it becomes clear that patterns repeat with variation. Similar ecological processes occur in different environments, but each expression is shaped by local conditions. Forests in different regions share common structures but differ in species composition. Oceans follow similar circulation patterns but vary in temperature and nutrient content. Grasslands, deserts, and wetlands each exhibit characteristic dynamics, yet all participate in the same fundamental processes of energy flow and nutrient cycling. This combination of similarity and variation is one of the defining features of life on Earth. The circle of life expresses universal principles through diverse manifestations. At deeper levels of organization, life also reveals a constant interplay between order and noise. Biological systems are not perfectly precise. Variability exists in gene expression, environmental conditions, and behavioral responses. This variability introduces a degree of unpredictability into biological processes. However, systems are often robust enough to function despite this noise. In some cases, variability even enhances adaptability by allowing systems to explore different responses. The circle of life includes this balance between order and noise, where stability emerges not from perfect precision, but from the ability to function within variation. When we step back and consider all these layers together, life appears as a continuous process of organization emerging from interaction. It is not a static structure, but a dynamic system maintained through constant exchange. Energy flows through it, matter cycles within it, and information shapes its patterns. Each level of organization contributes to the whole, and each part is connected through multiple pathways. The circle of life is therefore not a single mechanism, but a unified pattern emerging from countless interacting processes across all scales. And so, as this reflection gently continues, the understanding deepens that life is always in motion, always adjusting, and always connected. It does not stand still, yet it remains coherent. It does not repeat exactly, yet it preserves continuity. It exists as a vast and ongoing interplay of cycles, flows, and transformations, quietly sustaining the living world through every moment, across every scale, and within every form that life takes on Earth.